They thought the illusion of family could steal the sanctuary I sacrificed 10 years of my youth to build. But behind my closed doors was not a trembling sister. It was a flawless trap. Do you want to know how a blatant property heist orchestrated in under 24 hours morphed into the active crime scene of a $2 million federal fraud case with the most ruthless betrayals? Pay close attention to every single detail of this story. Hello to the wonderful audience of Maya Revenge Stories. I want to sincerely thank you for being here with us today. Unfortunately, YouTube has recently disabled our monetization features, leaving us without the budget to keep this channel running. If you find today's story captivating, please consider supporting us with just $1 so we can pay our hardworking staff to sustain their lives and continue creating these stories for you. You can help by scanning the QR code on your screen or clicking the donation link in the description or pinned comment of this video. I am Annie Carver, 34 years old. For a decade, I had bled my youth into the sterile, fluorescent-lit corridors of Verdant Synthetics, a massive biotech conglomerate that squeezed every ounce of sanity from its employees. I was their lead data architect, functioning on a brutal diet of maybe 3 hours of sleep and stale coffee for 10 long years. Every line of code, every complex database structure I built, took a piece of my soul. I pushed myself to the absolute brink of total physical and mental collapse, sacrificing relationships, holidays, and my own health just to secure my financial independence. When I finally submitted my resignation, I drained 100% of my life savings to purchase my ultimate sanctuary. It was not just a house. It was the physical manifestation of my freedom. The property was a stunning piece of modern architecture, a brilliant fusion of raw cedar wood and massive floor-to-ceiling glass panels, hidden away in absolute isolation along the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene in the state of Idaho. The water outside my window was a deep, mesmerizing emerald, surrounded by towering pines that whispered promises of absolute peace. The closest neighbor was over 5 miles away. When I stepped inside for the first time, breathing in the crisp scent of pine and fresh water, I felt my shattered nerves finally begin to knit back together. It was supposed to be my haven, the one place where the relentless demands and toxic elements of my past could not reach me. The illusion of peace lasted exactly until the sun dipped below the horizon on my very first night. I was standing in the immaculate kitchen, pouring a glass of red wine, letting the profound, heavy silence wash over me. Then, my phone shattered the quiet. The caller ID flashed with a name that instantly tightened my chest and made my blood run cold. Julian, my older brother. Julian had always been the golden child, a man whose entire existence was subsidized by my parents' blind adoration and, occasionally, my own forced financial contributions. He had never worked a hard day in his life, yet he carried himself with the unearned confidence of a self-made billionaire. I answered the phone, dread pooling heavily in my stomach. Before I could even offer a standard greeting, his voice dripped through the speaker, heavy with that familiar, sickeningly condescending tone. "Annie, listen carefully," Julian commanded, not asking, just dictating. "Mom, Dad, and I are packing up the cars right now. We will be arriving at the lake house tomorrow morning at exactly 9 o'clock. We have decided we need space, and the city is getting way too suffocating for us." I gripped the cold marble countertop, my knuckles turning white. "Excuse me? You are coming here? Tomorrow?" "Do not play dumb," he scoffed, his voice laced with venomous entitlement. "We all know this lake house is essentially shared family property. Mom and Dad paid for your college tuition 15 years ago, so by extension, they own a piece of everything you have. They have decided this house is the perfect place for us to relocate. If you cannot handle their arrangements, or if you feel too crowded by your own flesh and blood, you are more than welcome to pack your bags and go back to your miserable apartment in the city. But we are moving in, and that is final." For a fraction of a second, the old version of myself, the trembling sister who always yielded to the overwhelming force of her family, almost surfaced. But that girl was dead. The agonizing exhaustion from 10 years of corporate warfare had killed her. In her place stood a data architect who built impenetrable security systems for a living. I did not cry. I did not scream. I did not waste a single breath arguing with a parasite. Instead, I let a chillingly calm smile stretch across my face, though he could not see it through the screen. I softened my voice, stripping it of any anger, rendering it completely ice-cold and suspiciously pleasant. "All right, Julian," I said smoothly. "If that is what Mom and Dad really want, I will see you all tomorrow morning." I ended the call immediately, tossing the phone onto the counter before he could utter another syllable. The silence of the house returned, but it was no longer peaceful. It was heavy, suffocating, and thick with malicious intent. I walked slowly over to the massive glass window, staring out at the pitch-black surface of the lake. The reflection staring back at me was resolute and terrifyingly calm. I realized instantly that this was never a friendly family visit. My parents and my brother did not do spontaneous vacations in the wilderness. This was an organized, calculated invasion. They thought they could use the sheer weight of their numbers and the toxic guise of familial duty to crush me out of the only thing I truly owned. They expected me to roll over and submit. I looked at the digital clock glowing on the stove. It was 8 o'clock in the evening. I had exactly 13 hours until their arrival. The quiet lake house suddenly felt like a war room. If they wanted to claim my sanctuary as shared family property, I was going to give them a welcoming party they would never forget. The invasion was scheduled for tomorrow, which meant I had to initiate my counteroffensive tonight. I turned my back on the dark lake, leaving my wine completely untouched, and opened my laptop. The blue light of my monitor cut through the heavy darkness of the living room, casting sharp shadows against the cedar walls. I cracked my knuckles, the familiar rhythm of the keyboard instantly putting me into a state of hyperfocus. Verdant Synthetics had paid me to build fortresses around their proprietary data, but my true talent always lay in tearing digital walls down. People like my brother left digital footprints the size of craters, because arrogance always breeds carelessness. I bypassed the standard search engines entirely and dove straight into the deep architecture of the state business registration portals. Running a series of automated scraping scripts I had written years ago, I needed to know exactly why a man who could barely wake up before noon was suddenly orchestrating a highly coordinated family relocation at 9 o'clock in the morning. It took my algorithm exactly 14 minutes and 30 seconds to hit the jackpot. A newly registered limited liability company popped onto my screen, incorporated just 48 hours ago. The company was named Serenity Apex Wellness Group. According to the brilliantly fabricated executive summary attached to the public filing, Serenity Apex was poised to be the premier provider of high-end mental wellness retreats for burned-out tech executives. But what made my pulse pause was not the ridiculous corporate jargon. It was the registered corporate headquarters and the primary physical asset listed for collateral. There, glaring at me in crisp black text, was the exact longitude, latitude, and physical mailing address of my newly purchased lake house. Julian had not just claimed my home as family property, he had legally tethered his fraudulent corporate entity to my real estate. I dug deeper, my fingers flying across the keys as I pulled the articles of incorporation and the initial financial disclosures. I expected my parents to be clueless pawns, manipulated by their favorite son to pressure me out of the house. I was dead wrong. The corporate structure document revealed a staggering level of complicity. My mother and father were not just passive supporters. They were legally listed as the primary board of directors. Below their names was a projected payroll ledger that made my stomach churn. Julian had allocated them phantom salaries of $250,000 each, payable upon the completion of their initial seed funding round. They were not coming here for a family getaway. They were coming to collect their cut of a massive grift, entirely willing to throw their only daughter out onto the street to secure their payday. The scale of the operation began to unfold in real time as I breached a poorly secured cloud drive linked to the corporate email domain. Julian had been pitching this imaginary wellness retreat to a syndicate of venture capitalists based out of Silicon Valley. He had woven a masterpiece of deception, using stolen architectural photos of my house from the original real estate listing, claiming he had already secured the property and completed a $2 million renovation. The term sheets were signed. The investors had already placed $1.5 million into an escrow account, pending a final, in-person inspection of the facilities. And according to the calendar invite glaring at me from Julian's outbox, that inspection was scheduled for exactly 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. The entire grotesque puzzle snapped together with crystal clarity: the frantic phone call, the sudden need for space, the demand that I leave. They needed me gone by tomorrow morning so they could stage my home. Julian intended to parade those deep-pocketed venture capitalists through my living room, pointing to my custom cedar finishes and my smart home integrations as proof of his visionary business acumen. My parents would be there, playing the role of the benevolent board members, sipping my wine and sealing the deal. If I had packed my bags and fled back to the city like the obedient, broken sister they assumed I was, Julian would have walked away with millions, and I would be left fighting a convoluted legal battle to reclaim a house legally tangled in corporate fraud. Any residual anger I felt evaporated, replaced by a pure, unadulterated, freezing euphoria. A normal person would have panicked. A normal person would have dialed 911 and begged the local county sheriff to intervene. But a local sheriff would just see a domestic dispute, a messy family squabble over property rights that would take weeks to untangle in civil court. I did not want a civil dispute. I wanted annihilation. I opened a secure, encrypted communication channel. I bypassed the local authorities entirely and routed a direct connection to the tip line of the State Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau. These were the federal-level wolves, the forensic accountants with badges who lived to dismantle multi-million-dollar wire frauds. I spent the next 2 hours compiling a pristine, undeniable digital dossier. I packaged the fraudulent incorporation papers, the Internet Protocol log showing Julian forged my signature on the property consent forms, the venture capitalist term sheets, and the escrow account details. I attached a brief, surgically precise message detailing the exact time the perpetrators and the investors would be congregating at the scene of the crime. I hit send. The trap was no longer just a locked door. It was a federal snare. Now, I just needed to prepare the stage for the rats to walk into. The clock struck midnight, but exhaustion was a completely foreign concept to my body right now. My mind was operating with the lethal, frictionless precision of a supercomputer processing a final execution command. Julian probably expected me to spend these early morning hours weeping into my pillow, or perhaps rushing to a 24-hour hardware store to frantically buy brass deadbolts and heavy steel padlocks in a desperate, futile attempt to keep him out. He severely underestimated the architectural marvel I had purchased. The lake house did not rely on archaic tumblers and physical keys. It was an integrated organism, entirely tethered to a localized central mainframe that I, and only I, controlled. I did not waste a single second replacing physical locks. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor, pulled up the command terminal on my laptop, and systematically obliterated every default master code and wiped the biometric cache entirely clean. I rewrote the core access protocols line by line, establishing a localized firewall so aggressively robust that even if Julian managed to hire a professional penetration tester on short notice, it would take them a minimum of 6 months just to breach the outermost defensive layer. I severed the exterior keypad's network connection to the internal locking mechanism, deliberately leaving the green LED backlight active to give the comforting, deceptive illusion that it still functioned perfectly. The house was now an impenetrable digital vault, and I had just swallowed the only cryptographic key. Next came the visual blockade. The most stunning, widely advertised feature of the property was its extensive, breathtaking use of structural glass, offering panoramic, unobstructed views of the deep emerald water from almost every room. But what the public real estate listing had conveniently failed to mention, and what Julian certainly did not know, was that every single massive pane was constructed from aerospace-grade electrochromic smart glass. I synced the environmental control systems to an encrypted application on my smartphone, standing in the center of the expansive living room, bathed in the pale moonlight. I pressed a single command button on the touchscreen. With a faint, almost imperceptible hum of electrical current, the voltage running through the window frames altered the molecular alignment of the glass. In exactly 3 seconds, the transparent walls that showcased the beautiful Idaho wilderness shifted violently into a dense, impenetrable, pitch-black opacity. It was exactly like dropping a heavy velvet curtain over a lit stage. The house was instantly swallowed by darkness. No one could see in, and not a single photon of light could escape. The psychological impact of hitting an invisible, black wall would be devastating. I smiled, a genuine, cold curve of my lips, and pressed the button a second time, returning the glass to its pristine, welcoming transparency. The curtain was ready to fall on my command. At 2 o'clock in the morning, I required physical props for the grand finale. Through a highly discreet, premium courier and contracting service I frequently utilized during my most intense corporate crisis management days. I paid an exorbitant rush fee to have a specialized printing crew fabricate 3 massive metal signs. They arrived at the perimeter of my property in a black, unmarked van under the heavy cover of darkness, communicating only through secure text messages to maintain the absolute silence of the forest. I instructed them to plant the heavy steel posts deep into the soil at the very end of the gravel driveway, right where the property line began, and directly flanking the main entrance of the house. The bold, blood-red lettering printed on the heavy white aluminum was unmistakable and legally binding. It read, "Property sealed by Federal Investigation Agency." But I could not let Julian or my parents see those signs upon their initial arrival. That would trigger their survival instincts and ruin the element of a perfectly timed surprise. I directed the night crew to drape heavy dark green canvas tarps over the signs, completely blending them into the surrounding pine trees. We rigged the bottom corners of the canvas to a series of remote-controlled, pneumatic quick-release latches. A single, encrypted radio frequency signal from my command center would trigger the latches, dropping the tarps simultaneously in a fraction of a second. With the physical stage flawlessly set, I needed to ensure the audience was appropriately primed and eager. I accessed a secure, untraceable virtual private network server, routing my connection through 3 different overseas servers to mask my location. From there, I drafted an email directly to the exact list of Silicon Valley venture capitalists Julian had scheduled for the 10 o'clock tour. I spoofed the sender identification to make it appear as though the message came directly from the executive assistant desk at Serenity Apex Wellness Group. The subject line was crafted with surgical precision to trigger maximum greed and curiosity. The body of the email was brief, professional, and entirely fictitious. It read, "Gentlemen, we are thrilled to welcome you to the Coeur d'Alene property this morning. Please be advised that today's tour will conclude with a highly confidential, exclusive special reveal event that will profoundly impact the valuation of your initial investment. We look forward to your prompt arrival." I scheduled the email to deliver precisely at 6 o'clock in the morning, right as they would be waking up and checking their phones in their luxury downtown hotel suites. They would arrive hungry for a spectacle, their wallets practically open. By 4:30 in the morning, the interior preparations were complete. I packed a small, black duffel bag with a thermos of dark roast coffee, my primary laptop, and a high-resolution secondary monitor. I meticulously wiped down the kitchen counters and fluffed the living room pillows, leaving the house looking like an immaculate, untouched luxury showroom. I slipped out the back glass door, letting it lock automatically behind me, and walked 50 meters down the sloping, forested path to the enclosed boathouse hovering gently over the water. It was perfectly situated, offering a completely unobstructed, elevated view of the main driveway and the front porch through its slatted wooden windows. I set up my equipment on a sturdy wooden workbench, connecting my dual monitors to the hidden network of high-definition security cameras positioned at every possible angle of the property. The sun finally began to bleed over the jagged horizon, painting the calm, mirror-like surface of the lake in brilliant, violent streaks of orange and violet, the forest woke up with the gentle chirping of birds, entirely oblivious to the mechanical and digital trap woven seamlessly into its environment. I sat back in the heavy wooden chair, taking a slow, scalding sip of my coffee. The dual screens illuminated my face in a soft, bluish glow, displaying perfectly clear, real-time feeds of the empty gravel driveway. Every digital tripwire was armed. Every mechanical latch was primed. The snare was wide open, completely invisible to the naked eye. Now, there was absolutely nothing left to do but sit in the profound quiet of the dawn and wait for my incredibly arrogant family to march blindly into the abyss they had so eagerly dug for themselves. It was exactly 9 o'clock in the morning when the pristine, cathedral-like silence of the forest was violently interrupted. From the dim, quiet sanctuary of my boathouse, I watched the high-definition feeds on my dual monitors spring to life. Through the external audio receivers, I heard the heavy, rhythmic crunch of expensive rubber crushing gravel. A procession of 3 gleaming, black luxury sport utility vehicles snaked their way down my long, private driveway, looking entirely absurd against the backdrop of the wild, untamed Idaho wilderness. The invasion had officially arrived, right on schedule. Julian stepped out of the lead vehicle first, and I actually had to suppress a laugh. He was dressed in a custom-tailored navy blue Italian suit and polished leather loafers, an outfit so drastically unsuited for a lakeside retreat that it screamed of desperate overcompensation. He adjusted his expensive silk tie with the practiced arrogance of a man who fully believed he was the master of his universe. My parents emerged from the back seat, equally committed to this grotesque masquerade. My father sported a sharp charcoal blazer, while my mother tottered precariously on designer heels, draped in a heavy cashmere shawl. Following them from the trailing vehicles were 3 men dressed in unassuming, high-end business casual attire. These were the targets. Julian turned to them, spreading his arms wide with a grand, theatrical flourish, introducing them loudly as his very important VIP investors. The sheer audacity of the performance unfolding on my monitors was a masterpiece of toxic delusion. My parents immediately launched into their heavily rehearsed routine, eager to earn their imaginary $250,000 board member salaries. My mother pointed her perfectly manicured finger toward the sweeping roofline of my home, her voice carrying crisp and clear through the hidden microphones. As you can see, gentlemen, our family's strategic vision has always been about harmonizing ultimate luxury with the raw, healing energy of nature, she proclaimed, lying with the effortless, sickening grace of a seasoned con artist. My father nodded sagely, gesturing to the expansive, crystal-clear glass walls that offered a breathtaking view of the Emerald Lake right through the living room. We spared absolutely no expense on the structural integrity or the interior finishes. This facility is the absolute crown jewel of our wellness portfolio. They were selling my sanctuary, the physical manifestation of 10 years of my blood, sweat, and corporate agony, like it was a cheap timeshare they had flipped over the weekend. Julian, beaming with unearned pride, led the group up the wide cedar steps to the main entrance. He approached the digital keypad with an insufferable, swaggering confidence. I knew exactly where that confidence came from. Weeks ago, during an agonizingly forced Sunday dinner at my parents' house, he had stealthily watched over my shoulder via their hallway security camera as I typed in my old access code. He truly thought he possessed the master key to his multi-million-dollar payday. He confidently punched in the 6 digits, expecting the heavy oak door to swing open and welcome him to his stolen empire. The system did not emit the pleasant, welcoming chime he anticipated. Instead, a harsh, low-pitched buzz echoed across the wooden porch, and the LED ring around the keypad flashed a violent, angry red. Access denied. Julian frowned, his perfectly cultivated, charismatic smile faltering for a fraction of a second. He let out a nervous chuckle, muttering an apology to the confused investors standing behind him, blaming a simple, temporary technical glitch. He quickly and forcefully typed the 6 numbers again. Another loud buzz. Another harsh red glare. From the safety of the boathouse, I smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the cold, predatory grin of a spider feeling a violent tug on its web. I did not want to leave him hanging in suspense for too long. My finger rested lightly on the touchscreen of my control tablet. I pressed the primary execute command. In a fraction of a second, a massive surge of electrical current shot through the smart glass framework of the entire house. The magnificent, transparent walls that had just been brilliantly reflecting the morning sun instantly turned into a dense, solid block of pitch-black void. The transformation was so sudden, so violent in its absolute opacity, that several members of the group actually stumbled backward in genuine shock. It was as if a massive, impenetrable black vault door had just slammed shut right in their faces. Julian froze. He stood paralyzed, staring blankly at the opaque black surface where his own reflection now stared back at him in stark, pathetic contrast. Panic, pure and unadulterated, began to bleed rapidly through his tailored facade. He completely abandoned all pretense of being a visionary corporate executive. Driven by sheer, childish desperation, he slammed his open palms violently against the impenetrable black glass, the dull, heavy thud echoing awkwardly into the quiet forest. "Annie!" he screamed, his voice cracking and rising to an embarrassing, hysterical pitch, completely shattering the illusion of the composed CEO in front of the silent, watchful men standing right behind him. "Annie, open this door right now!" Julian's hands were still flat against the blackened glass, his desperate shouting echoing off the cedar siding. I leaned forward in my chair, pressing my lips close to the high-fidelity condenser microphone resting on my workbench. With a single tap, I engaged the property's external public address system, a high-end surround sound network normally reserved for ambient jazz during summer barbecues. "Good morning, Julian, Mom, Dad, and welcome, gentlemen, to the primary crime scene of a massive, multi-million-dollar federal wire fraud." My voice boomed from the hidden outdoor speakers, rolling across the driveway like absolute thunder. It was completely stripped of all emotion, echoing off the towering pines with godlike authority. Julian flinched backward as if he had been physically struck across the face, his jaw dropping wide open. My parents froze dead in their tracks, the color draining so rapidly from their faces they looked like ghosts standing in the morning sun. I did not give them a single second to process the shock before I delivered the lethal blow. "Before you is not the corporate headquarters of Serenity Apex Wellness Group. This is my private residence, purchased solely with my own money. Julian, you falsified state business registries 48 hours ago. You illegally listed this exact physical address as the collateral asset to secure $1,500,000 in illicit seed funding. Did you really think a syndicate of elite investors would blindly wire that kind of money without someone running a basic background check on the registered property owner? I received the notification the very moment you filed the fraudulent paperwork." I paused, letting the enormous numbers hang heavily in the crisp, gold air. Through the camera feed, I watched my mother grasp my father's arm, her eyes darting around wildly in search of the hidden speakers. "And to the highly esteemed board of directors," I continued, my voice dripping with surgical, venomous precision. "I hope you thoroughly enjoyed the view, because the $250,000 salaries Julian promised each of you upon the successful completion of this morning's tour will not be clearing your bank accounts today, tomorrow, or ever." With my left hand, I hit the secondary execute command on my tablet. A sharp, loud, mechanical snap echoed from the perimeter of the gravel driveway. The remote-controlled pneumatic latches I had installed at 2 o'clock in the morning instantly disengaged. The heavy, dark green canvas tarps, which had been completely invisible against the tree line just moments before, plummeted to the damp forest floor in perfect unison. There they stood, flanked like grim sentinels on either side of the entrance, 3 massive, blindingly white aluminum signs bearing bold, blood-red typography. The text was large enough to be read from 30 yards away. "Property sealed by Federal Investigation Agency, Authorized entry strictly prohibited. The silence that followed was absolute, terrifying, and profound. The rustling of the wind through the pines seemed to entirely cease. Julian slowly turned his head to read the signs, his knees visibly buckling under the immense weight of his impending doom. But the most spectacular, devastating moment of the morning did not come from the booming speakers, or the blackened smart glass, or the hidden federal signs. It came from the three quiet men standing directly behind my brother. The men Julian fully believed were gullible Silicon Valley venture capitalists carrying open checkbooks. The men he had confidently invited onto my property to seal his masterpiece of deception. The illusion shattered instantly. The three men did not look confused or surprised by my booming voice or the sudden appearance of the federal warning signs. In fact, their relaxed, unassuming postures vanished completely, replaced by the rigid, hyper-alert tactical stances of highly trained law enforcement officers. The tallest of the three men, the one wearing a light gray windbreaker, reached swiftly inside his jacket. He did not pull out a luxury fountain pen or a leather-bound checkbook. He retrieved a heavy leather wallet, flipping it open with a practiced flick of his wrist to reveal a gleaming gold star and a laminated federal credential. "Julian Carver," the man announced, his voice carrying a harsh, authoritative grit that sliced cleanly through the lingering echoes of the outdoor speakers. "Special Agent Miller, State Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau. You and your entire board of directors are surrounded. Do not make a single sudden movement." In perfect, terrifying synchronization, the other two agents unclipped their hidden holsters, their hands resting firmly on the grips of their service weapons. The sound of tactical gear shifting and heavy steel handcuffs rattling replaced the peaceful chirping of the morning birds. "Hands where we can see them," Agent Miller barked, stepping forward and aggressively closing the distance. "All three of you, step away from the entrance, turn around, place your hands flat on the hood of the lead vehicle, and spread your legs. Move right now." What followed was the most beautiful, chaotic, and utter destruction of a toxic family dynamic I could have ever possibly orchestrated. The very second the gold badges flashed in the morning sun, the absolute, unconditional love my parents had always showered upon their golden child instantly evaporated into pure, venomous, animalistic self-preservation. My mother let out a shrill, hysterical shriek, violently swatting Julian away from her as if he were covered in a deadly, infectious virus. "We have absolutely nothing to do with this," she screamed, her voice tearing through the air, her face twisted in a hideous mask of absolute terror and vicious denial. "We are entirely innocent. He lied to us. This is all his doing. Julian, you absolute monster. What have you done to us?" My father, the man who had just proudly boasted about his strategic vision to the undercover agents exactly 5 minutes prior, began violently shaking his head, raising his trembling hands in a frantic, cowardly gesture of surrender. "Officers, you have to listen to me. We are the true victims here. My son is a pathological liar. We did not sign any documents willingly. He forged our signatures. We thought we were just coming here for a peaceful family vacation. He is a complete sociopath." They threw him to the wolves without a singular moment of hesitation. They ruthlessly cursed the son they had worshipped for 30 years, begging the federal agents for mercy, tripping over their own expensive, polished shoes as they scrambled frantically toward the hood of the black sport utility vehicle. My mother, entirely stripped of her cashmere dignity, practically threw herself against the hood of the car before the agent could even touch her. She was sobbing uncontrollably, her expensive makeup running down her face in dark, ugly streaks, screaming that she would gladly testify against her own son in federal court. Julian was completely paralyzed, his mind, entirely incapable of processing the monumental, catastrophic scale of his failure, simply broke in half. He stood frozen on the cedar steps, staring blankly at the mother and father who were currently screaming for his immediate arrest. He looked at the impenetrable black glass that had permanently locked him out of his stolen empire. He looked at the federal badges rapidly closing in on him. The invincible entrepreneur, The arrogant golden child was reduced to a hyperventilating, broken mess. A dark, pathetic stain began to spread rapidly down the leg of his custom navy blue trousers. He let out a loud, wheezing sob as Agent Miller forcefully grabbed him by the shoulder, spun him around roughly, and slammed his tailored chest against the cold metal of the vehicle, violently ratcheting the cold, hard steel of the handcuffs tightly around his wrists. Agent Miller did not even flinch at my parents' hysterical, desperate performance. With deliberate, agonizing slowness, he reached into the inner pocket of his light gray windbreaker and produced a thick, tightly bound manila folder. He flipped it open right on the hood of the black vehicle, directly under their terrified noses. "Save the theatrical performance for the judge," Agent Miller said, his voice entirely devoid of sympathy. "We have the certified tax authorization forms right here. Both of your signatures are clearly printed in black ink, notarized and filed legally with the state exactly 24 hours ago. Furthermore, we have already tracked the preliminary wire transfers from the Serenity Apex escrow account flowing directly into your personal checking accounts. You are not victims. You are fully willing co-conspirators in a multi-million-dollar federal felony." My mother stopped screaming instantly. The blood completely drained from my father's face. The irrefutable, physical proof crushed their pathetic lies into absolute dust. They slumped against the vehicle, completely defeated and trembling violently. Julian, still forcefully pinned against the car by the other agent, twisted his neck wildly until his wide, terrified eyes locked onto the small, black dome of the security camera mounted above the front porch. Tears were streaming heavily down his face, mixing with sweat and sheer panic. "Annie, please," he wailed, his voice a pathetic, broken screech that echoed through the trees. "Please say something. Tell them it is a misunderstanding. You cannot do this to your own family. Annie, I am begging you, please save us." I sat comfortably in the boathouse, watching his complete destruction unfold in high definition on the glowing monitors. I did not reach for the microphone. I did not utter a single syllable. I offered him exactly what he and my parents had offered me for the last 10 years: absolute, crushing nothingness. The external speakers remained dead silent. Within 20 minutes, heavy federal transport vans arrived, their red and blue lights slicing through the serene morning fog. My parents and my brother, thoroughly handcuffed and entirely stripped of every ounce of their arrogant dignity, were shoved roughly into the back of the steel cages. A fleet of heavy-duty tow trucks rumbled down the driveway shortly after, violently hooking up the rented luxury vehicles and dragging them away like worthless scrap metal. I stayed in the boathouse until the very last flashing siren disappeared over the distant ridge and the deep, natural silence of the forest finally returned. Then, I picked up my ceramic mug, the coffee still pleasantly warm, and stepped out into the crisp morning air. I walked slowly up the winding gravel path toward the house. Standing on the front porch, I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen one final time. The massive pitch-black walls of the house hummed softly, and in 3 seconds, the glass faded back to crystal clear. The golden, warm sunlight of the early morning flooded the empty, immaculate living room, chasing away every single shadow. I walked through the house, sliding open the large glass doors to the back balcony. I sat down on the comfortable outdoor sofa, resting my feet on the railing. The water of Lake Coeur d'Alene stretched out before me, completely flat and shining like a massive, brilliant mirror. I took a slow sip of my coffee, breathing in the fresh scent of pine and absolute freedom. The toxic parasites were gone forever, locked in a federal nightmare of their own making. For the very first time in my life, I was completely alone, completely safe, and utterly at peace. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. Where in the world are you tuning in from right now? If you enjoyed this story and want to help us keep this channel alive, please consider supporting us with just $1. Your kindness allows us to pay our dedicated staff, helping them feed their families and continue creating even better stories for you. You can easily donate by scanning the QR code on your screen or by clicking the link in the description or the pinned comment below. Thank you. and have a wonderful day.